So in this video we're going to go over how to install Ansible and then creating our first playbook, a very simple playbook, and then going further with playbooks and talk about how to nest them for reusable tasks. So to get started with installing Ansible, I'm going to do it on an AWS Linux instance. And I'm going to try to use yum because that's what I'm most familiar with. I'll do yum install -y, which is answer yes. Try Ansible 2. If that doesn't work, try Ansible. But what it's going to tell me is that in AWS Linux, what you really want to do is sudo Amazon Linux Extras install Ansible 2. So we'll go ahead and type that in. So now that that's installed, we'll just type in Ansible -- version. And as long as we get something back that's not an error, that means we've installed it correctly. Alright, so now we're going to create a very basic playbook. So in our home directory, I'm just going to create a new subdirectory, my Ansible files, and I'm going to cd into that. That way I know where my files are in relation to everything else. And I'm just going to create first.yaml. I'm going to call it. YAML is the file structure for Ansible, if you're not familiar with that, and I'll include a link below. So we're going to do the basic header information that's in all Ansible files, and for hosts I'm going to use localhost, which is my local machine, my AWS Linux that I'm working on right here. And for vars, we're going to leave it blank for now, but we're going to use it later on. And then for tasks, I'm just going to create one very basic simple task. So first we give it a name, and I'm going to call mine simple task. And then we're going to do a debug task with a message just to print out hello from Ansible. So let's go ahead and save this. And then we're going to do Ansible Playbook and give it the name of our first YAML file to execute it. So there you go. Task, simple task shows in green the message hello from Ansible. So that means we've successfully executed our first playbook. So now we're going to take a look at nesting playbooks, in other words looping and reusing code in a second file. So let's look at our first YAML file, which has been updated since the last. And you can see that in the vars section we've added stats, which is basically an array with 3 values, 1, 2, and 3. We still have our simple task that says hello, but then we've got this include tasks, and that calls include second YAML. Now that's going to loop in this file first, but it's going to call include second YAML for every loop iteration. And for the loop, we're going to feed it the array stats, but convert it to a list because Ansible requires lists for all its loops. And then we're going to give it a label and a loop var of items. And also notice the index var is called item_number, which is really your loop iterator. So now let's edit include second.yaml, which is going to be our template that gets included every time the loop executes. Notice right off the bat there's no headers like in the other file. There's just tasks. So the first one is just name, second file included here. And again, debug with a message, and we're just going to say hello from the second file being called from the loop. And output the loop iteration. So we use the squiggly brackets twice, open up, and then we use item number, and then close the squiggly braces, and then end our quotes. Now remember, item_number is how this second file is receiving the loop iterator value. So if we go back to the first file where we have our loop construct, our index var is defined as item_number. If we called it item_gocarts, it would come out as item_gocarts in the second file. Whatever you call it here is whatever you got to reference it as in the second file. So now we'll go ahead and execute our playbook. And the first thing you can notice is up top in the kind of bluish green underneath our hello from Ansible is the include task executed 3 times, the same number of times as there were elements in our stats array. And on the output from the second file, which was included, you can see the first time it outputted iteration was 0, second time was 1, and the third time was 2, because the array and list start at 0 instead of 1. So now let's go back in to our first file and slightly modify it. Remember before our vars had an array called stats with values 1, 2, and 3. Well, now we're going to change that to A, B, and C. And now we'll get a good look at what the difference is in terms of the output for not just the index var, which should be 0, 1, and 2, because that's the iterator, but then we have to look at what our ABC array, known as stats, which gets converted to a list, appears as in the second file, and that will be referenced under the name items, which is the loop underscore var. We'll go back in and edit our second file, and we're going to add a second task. And basically the second task is going to focus on not the loop iteration, the value of the actual index var, but it's going to focus on the item in the stats array. So hopefully in the second task we're creating here, we're going to start to see the A, B, and C, or whatever values are in our array. So just like above, we're going to do a debug task with a message, and we're going to include the variable name from the first file, which if you remember was just items. And again, we're going to have to include that in 2 open braces, and then the name items, and then 2 close braces inside of our string message. And for that, as it iterates, we expect the values of, again, A, B, and C, the values within the stats array. So we'll go ahead and save that. And we're going to just go back through this on the first file. The loop var is items, and what it's looping through is a list from that was created from the stats array. So let's go ahead and run that. So again, the include tasks runs 1, 2, 3 times as it did before, and the output, the index var is 0, and for that iteration the value of items is A. The second time the index var is 1, and for that iteration the value of items is B. And lastly, the third time it runs, the loop iterator is 2, and the value of items is C. So essentially it's calling the stats array, and it's looping through each position. Position 0 is A, position 1 is B, and position 2 is C. So not only in this example are we using a include tasks, but we're also doing a loop iteration. And this is how Ansible does loops. Ansible uses the second YAML file to execute the inner portion of a loop. So the tips from today's video: install Ansible as root. If you don't want any complications, you can use brew, yum, apt-get, and of course the Amazon installer that we saw earlier, depending on your flavor of Linux. And just type Ansible version to confirm the installation was successful. And for creating a playbook, remember to create with the .yaml extension and follow the YAML syntax. You can edit in any text editor, and the tasks section is really where it's going to execute inside the YAML file block by block. And lastly, with nesting playbooks, it's great for code reuse and templating, and the loops are done via nesting also, so this is how you do looping in Ansible. So if you ever need to do loop over an item or do special action on each item, then this is definitely a way to do that in Ansible. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and please hit the subscribe button, and thank you for your time.